Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Cory Gaines, must-read author of the Colorado Accountability Project and over at Complete Colorado. Well, Cory, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on and have a chance to talk about this. This is a really important issue, and I hope I can convince people to speak up.
Well, Cory, I've really appreciated your articles on the State Land Board, an entity that doesn't get a lot of attention. I didn't really know much about, but it really plays this big role in our state land use policy. So, very interested to hear more about that. And I really enjoyed your recent articles where you've helped expose these radical anti industrial and I would even say anti civilization activists who've been
Mhm.
appointed by our governor, who are now all of a sudden in these decision making positions, these very powerful positions, and are so extreme. People need to know about it. So maybe to start with, Cory, can you explain the state land board for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so our state owns a bunch of land. Some of it was given to the state by the federal government when we became a state. Technically, all this land was owned by the feds because it was the U.S., and then it was given to the state. Some of this land is what's called state trust land, and our state leases it for certain uses, right? In particular, they are required. There was a later amendment voted in by voters. I forget when, but it hasn't been too long. It's been within a generation, I believe. Voters voted in an amendment that deals with how, like, what the purpose of the land board is, what it can lease these lands for. Some of those uses, the most common ones, are for mineral extraction. And that means mainly like oil and gas, right? I suppose you could lease it for other minerals, but when we're talking here in the state of Colorado, it's going to be oil and gas mainly. Then there is ranching uses, right? And then sort of the third most common one would be recreation. And what that means is it's the land would be leased to a guide, and the guide then takes people to go hunting. So when the state leases this land, so the rancher, for example, if you're going to lease a few acres to go graze cattle on, that generates money, and that money goes to the state. The rancher pays the state because he got value from it, right? He got his cows got fed for a while. That money goes to the state, and the state land board is required by the Constitution to then put that money into a fund and use it to fund public education. Now, by and large, that doesn't mean teacher salaries and things like that. What it more often than not means is grants to school districts to update their building or maybe update their infrastructure so that the schools run better, or maybe they have AC now, whereas they didn't before.
Yeah, very interesting. And I mean, so much of the state of Colorado is public land. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I know there's a lot of government land and state controlled land in the state, especially a part of the whole Western United States. So it's really a big deal. I mean, it's a huge amount of territory that people just don't necessarily know much about. And I kind of chose these graphics here for the slides because I would say these people are not just environmentalists, but they're very extreme in some of their environmental beliefs and extreme in their animal rights beliefs as well, to the point where I would say they are against our industrial civilization. And it's pretty wild. So let's jump into one of these recent people you've helped expose.
Yeah. Well, so what you're looking at here in the picture, that's Dr. Rosmarino, Nicole Rosmarino. And I should say, too, that what I write, I owe a ton of credit to Rachel Gable over at the Fence Post and who does op-eds. She has done incredible work at bringing this stuff to light. And a lot of times what I'm doing is sort of acting as a radio repeater for her work. She got me put onto this, and I've done some of my own research. And this Dr. Rosmarino, it turns out, she is a friend, and she has a lot of ties with both the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, certain commissioners that are on there now, as well as the governor's office and the governor's husband. I think there's an affinity there in terms of ideology about animals and things like that, especially with the governor's husband. But she has also acted as an advisor to the governor about things like wildlife. She's also highly involved in a project which is in southeastern Colorado called the Southern Plains Land Trust. And you can go look it up. The Southern Plains Land Trust is a group that is buying up land in southeastern Colorado with the express intent of what's called rewilding it. So they will go through and remove traces of human settlement that were there. It was older or newer. They'll buy up ranches. They'll take out human settlement. They'll yank out fences. They might also try to get rid of some of the more, like the invasive species, or the species that are there largely because human agricultural, mainly, activity has been going on there. And she is quite an extremist in her views. So she's busy. She does a lot.
Yeah, and I sympathize with a lot of that. I love our great open space here in Colorado. Love all the parks, and whether they're city parks to state parks to national parks, we're so lucky to have so much great area. But unfortunately, some of these people would rather see. Are you hearing that? Are you hearing
Yeah,
that feedback? I don't know what's causing that. Here, let me see.
it sounds like something out of Star Wars.
I think it's feedback from me talking, I think. I'm not sure.
Let me turn my sound down, see if it stays. All right. Try talking.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I still got the feedback.
I can't really hear it that much, at least. Now I can. So that's part of the reason I wear headphones, because I had this issue once with somebody way back in the day.
Okay.
Um,
You suppose it's an internet connection issue?
I don't think so. I think it's just picking up my audio and then it's feeding it back to me that way. I don't know how I can. Let me see if there's a way to.
Was it on my end? Is there something you can tell me to do, or
If you do you have headphones?
yeah, let me go get some. I mean,
All right.
they've got a wire on them. I don't know if that's an issue. I don't
No,
care.
mine's wired.
Okay, hang on one sec. We'll come in with the recording. I'll be wearing a different shirt and a beard. Like, what the hell happened over there? Okay, let's see.
All right,
All
can you
right,
hear me?
I can hear you. I'm
Okay.
not
Yeah, I don't
hearing
hear any.
buzzing now.
No, I don't hear any feedback because it's not picking up my voice. So
My
that's
screen
perfect.
coming, yeah, my audio coming back through my microphone to your audio. Yeah.
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
so
perfect. All right. All right.
I just have to remember not to move too far back too quick. Okay.
All right, here we
Oh,
go. And Corey, I have some sympathy for these people. I love our national parks. I love our state parks, even our city parks. We have so much great open space, great wildlife, and we're truly blessed here in Colorado to be able to experience the outdoors. But it can't come at the expense of humans, right? I mean, we have to think about people, of course, and how important we are to to protecting just the quality of life that people have. And I mean, all of this should be in service to people in terms of our food, our energy production, all of this. To have somebody within our government who has a loyalty to something other than people, to maybe an ideology that has to do more with preserving natural spaces and preserving animal life over human life, I think that's something people should be really concerned about.
I would agree, and I think that it doesn't, in my mind, need to be an either or. Just because you're running cattle on land does not mean that what they're going to leave behind is this desertified piece of land with barren and sand blowing and stuff like that. Grazing cattle on land can actually be healthy for the land, and there are ways to get minerals out with minimal impact, and then the land can sort of be returned to the state in which it was at the beginning. But if we are to live, we need to make use of the resources. And these are lands that are owned by the entire state. And therefore, that means the entire state's needs and the entire state's values should be reflected in how these lands are used, as opposed to just saying, well, this land is high value we're going to not allow humans on it. and let it return to a native state, and then we'll watch through binoculars and all that. Not everybody is going to agree there. And when you blank things off from agricultural or energy production, you're going to probably have higher prices because you limit your supply. And you're going to put a whole bunch of people out of business, right?
Yeah, fair point completely here. Here's a clipping from one of Rachel Gable's articles. As you said, definitely
Mm-hmm.
people encourage people to read anything that she writes. Always very interesting stuff in terms of Colorado's
Yes.
agricultural community and Western Slope and everywhere outside of the Denver metro area. But this was the PLC president and Colorado rancher, Tim Canterbury, is opposed to the choice. He said, quote, Nicole Rosmarino has spent a career in organizations that hold radical anti-ranching beliefs. She has made clear that she views grazing on federal lands as an obstacle to her goals of rewilding the West at the expense of families, communities, and the lands that have benefited from generations of ranchers' care taking. Putting a radical activist in charge of the state lands board at a time when Colorado is facing important decisions about the future of our home and our economy is not good governance. It is political activism in its worst form.
Yep. And this has been a pattern for our current administration. Now, Governor Polis, the story I got when I looked into this was that the Department of Natural Resources searched for a candidate, which is where the state land board is located. They're mixed in with the DNR, if I understand it correctly. They found the candidate, and what they told me in a statement, because I asked them for a statement about this, was that they worked with the governor's office. But I don't know. From what I've seen and read, I don't know that there's a huge distinction between the governor's office and anything underneath it. In other words, I don't sort of see this as a benign neglect kind of thing. I think the governor's office is deeply involved in it, and this is a pattern from our governor of making sure that these extremists get appointed to these boards, and that they have a voice in this state in terms of policy that intersects with some of the largest industry in the state, which is, if you look at by the numbers in terms of economic activity, ranching and beef production is a giant industry in Colorado.
Yeah, huge. And not only that, but they feed us. I
Yeah,
mean, the foundation of civilization itself, of providing food to having somebody provide food to people, provide energy through oil and gas. I mean, yeah, these are fundamentals here. And so to have somebody who maybe has other allegiances, yeah, unfortunately not surprising, not shocking, probably like it should be. Uh,
yeah.
here's
Well,
another clip. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I have heard people say that. I talk a fair bit with people who work in ag. Food security is national security, and that is
Yeah.
exactly right. We need to be producing our own food here, not only in the United States, but in the state of Colorado. We need to be producing our own food, because if you really like the price instability and the way that prices can make these huge jumps with world events, then we should do, if you like that, we should do that with food, because if we start outsourcing our food, that's what's going to happen to food prices too.
Well, and everybody remembers, I'm sure, the egg prices at the beginning of this year. You couldn't find eggs, then the prices skyrocketed. You know, we had this cage-free egg law, and then there was this bird flu issue, and we're seeing that kind of pop up all over. So yeah, it's creating instability, and it's affecting people's ability to eat healthy. I mean, it's it's not good,
Yeah.
folks, but it is the inevitable conclusion of central planning, of kind of this like top-down authoritarian structure where these experts and these individuals know better than everybody else. You know, hey, you don't need you don't need ranchers, you don't need oil and gas. What we need are more
Right.
wolves. We need more untouched land. You know, that's going to make everybody better off. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I like wild nature and all that, but I also like a full belly and a warm house in winter. Call me crazy.
Yeah, and I'll post all the links, of course, at Free State Colorado. But this is from another article from the great Rachel Gable here. You got to see this, folks. Rosmarino called the Vail arson, if people remember that back in the day, where somebody committed an arson attack against this new development that was being put in. I believe it was hotels. The Vail arson, quote, one of the most beautiful acts of economic sabotage ever in this state, end quote. Wow. And told the reporter she was, quote, jumping up and down with delight, end quote. According to Marco's reporting, Rosmarino called the arsonists heroes. Yikes. Quote, this was not terrorism. It was economic sabotage, and it did more for the cause than anything that came before it, end quote, Rosmarino said. Quote, the reaction from those who purport to speak for wildlife is really a reaction of fear. If they don't have the courage to light the match, that's fine. But to attack those who did is sheer hypocrisy, end quote. Wow. What do you think about that, Cory?
Right. Yeah. Said another way, these arsonists were just doing out loud what everybody's thinking, right? No, I mean, when I said earlier that Rosmarino is an extremist, that's not hyperbole. That that characterization of her comes from this quote right down there, because she is an extremist. Simply reading through that lets you know that it's okay to have views that are different than mine. It's okay to have an opinion about wildlife that is different from mine, or that says that wildlife are important. And it's even okay to have the view that having wildlife is more important than having beef in this state. But what's not okay is to say that the way we're going to decide the issue is, if I don't agree with what you're doing, I'm going to threaten people's lives and cause untold damage to property to convince you to do it. That's the part that's not okay. I mean, in the same way that you can't use violence to convince somebody, you shouldn't be using eco-terrorism to convince people of your position either. And she's clearly a big fan. Well, let me say it this way. She, at the time at least, don't know what she's thinking now. She might say it differently. At the time, at least, she thought this was a grand idea and a great way to solve that problem and to have the discussion.
Absolutely incredible that. And again, not surprising, but so unfortunate that this person is being considered for a high level position dealing with our natural resources and our public land here in Colorado. So
Yeah.
here's a clipping from your Substack that you clipped off here, and I thought this was so interesting because you really brought up this point of this connection. And anybody who's been paying attention to the disaster of the wolf reintroduction, especially on Facebook, there's
Mhm.
some great groups there, has seen that Marlon Reis, the husband of Jared Polis, has totally been not just unsympathetic but relatively hostile to ranchers and
Yeah.
unapologetic about all the destruction and disaster, the deaths of all this livestock and all these animals, these poor cows. So I thought this
Mhm.
was really interesting here. I'll just read it briefly here. It says, who gets access to wildlife policy and who doesn't? After posting on the First Gentleman's special access to Polis's wildlife advisor, I had a reader ask who the advisor was. This was the advisor who that wouldn't dream of holding a meeting on wolf wildlife policy without Mr. Race present. A link to that day's newsletter first below if you want need context. Took a bit, but I got an answer to that question. I got a whole lot more to share in the process. I have a whole web of connections among the wealthy and politically connected to share. A story swampier than my armpit after a summer's day working outside in a three-piece suit. That's swampy. The picture at the top of this post gives the story. The first gentleman has the ear of the governor's wildlife advisor. That advisor is Nicole Rosmarino, a well to do advocate of rewilding. Rosmarino
Mhm.
works with one of Polis's CPW commissioners, Jay Tuchon, himself an advocate of rewilding at the Southern Plains Land Trust, SPLT, an organization working to buy up tracts in the Southern Plains of Colorado in order to rewild the area. Wow.
Yeah. Yes. Like I say, I mean, there's a whole lot of connections that are going on here at the governor's office and at CPW, which is also in the Department of Natural Resources. Um, and of course, like it's never any outright stated thing, but there are all these connections that are happening here. Who's the advisor? Who gets the ear of the governor? Who gets to actually talk about this policy, and who gets to help shape it? Um, and when you look at all the different people that could be involved in this, and then when I wrote to DNR and the governor's office to ask again about this, part of that other statement was that Dr. Rosmarino, being the sole finalist for this job, was the result of a national search. Let me repeat that. A national search, and the best they could come up with was this woman. Like, so from the entire nation, everybody that could have possibly applied for this job. And I remember reading that and thinking, like, I was born in the morning, but it wasn't just this morning, because this is the best that you could come up with. I have the strong suspicion that I mean, I've worked for the state of Colorado for a while, and I know how it works. You can bend the rules such that you can get the outcome you want, even though the rules are the rules, right? And I think that just sort of like the fix is in here, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the policy of Colorado to better fit what these extremists want, as opposed to what would be good. If you gathered up, like if you like, because you gather up 100 people who list their job occupation as ag, right, or involved with animals in some way, like there'll be 3 people who work on organic Birkenstock farms and Nicole Rosmarino, and the other 97 are your everyday farmers and ranchers who have a stake in this business, who have knowledge about production agriculture, who understand what it means to be a rancher, who understand what it means to work cattle on public land. And yet, this is who they picked. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, what a coincidence. After searching across the whole country, you end up with the
Yeah,
person who's the advisor to the governor and the first gentleman there. So,
it's
wow.
a Festivus miracle.
I definitely encourage people to read all your articles here. Really interesting stuff, but you really spell out why the State Land Board is so important. As you mentioned earlier, arranges these leases on state trust lands,
Mhm.
mineral extraction, grazing, recreation, and so important there. Here's that quote you have from that Fence Post article. Quote, Nicole Rosmarino is the sole finalist for the director of the State Land Board, which is the state's second largest landowner with 2.8 million surface areas and 4 million mineral estate acres. I mean, that's such a it's unfathomable. I can't even imagine how big
Mhm.
that is. That's a lot. I mean, it's a huge portion of our land, and to have somebody here to be the director of that, who holds these beliefs. I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, somebody that's been openly hostile to the beef industry. And my guess is, although I can't think of a case where I've seen her say it, my guess is probably openly hostile to the fossil fuel industry as well. Probably even hunting, which I think we'll get to here in a little bit due to her connections. Um, those are the 3 biggest leaseholders for these public lands in the state, and she's going to be running it. So even if she doesn't, like, even if there's ways that block her and prevent her from injecting her desired policy and the governor or the governor's husband's policy into the mix here, you have to understand that she's working with those people, and things she said in the relationships she's formed in the past. You know, it would be like, if I said that I absolutely hated English, and then you appoint me as the department head for the English department, and I have to work with a bunch of people who they know I hate what they do, right? Um, is that going to be a real successful and smooth working relationship? Probably not.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So that's for sure. One of your more recent articles here from May 23rd, Polis's Colorado for All means environmentalists and animal rights advocates. So yeah, definitely pretty one-sided there, like you said. So many other options with people who actually involved in agriculture, involved in even hunting or oil and gas. But of course, it's the
Mhm.
ideologues that get these positions here. So I really appreciate you bringing this guy to light. What can you tell us about this other, what I would say is an extreme environmentalist here?
So this is Mr. Preble. That's his picture you're looking at. And here's what I was alluding to earlier when I said probably some of these other connections. This would be one. He and then I believe it was a Grand County rancher whose name escapes me right now were both appointed to the state land board by the governor. These appointments, they get appointed by the governor, and then they have to get cleared by the Senate. Both Mr. Preble and the other gentleman got cleared by the Senate. The thing that makes this gentleman notable is he's been a big influence in the wolf reintroduction sphere. And in addition to that, he has also been greatly involved with things that, like with the initiative, I forget the number, but it was the initiative to prevent big cat hunting in Colorado. Um, and yeah, what you can see on your screen right now is Prop 127. Mr. Preble was one of three authors on a an op-ed that appeared in the paper um, in support of that big cat hunting ban. But the other two authors were CPW commissioners, other Polis appointees, and that ended up going to a lawsuit where CPW had to take some training about open meetings law because when they worked with Mr. Prebill on their op-ed, they were actually holding a public meeting. And then they put that op-ed out there in favor of this initiative to stop big cat hunting. And then in my Substack newsletter, it's a little bit of highlighting at the bottom. Mr. Prebill also wrote, he does a lot of op-eds. He wrote one back in 2024 in December in support of wolf reintroduction. And basically, I'll leave it to you to kind of read the full quote there, but the upshot of it was that the ranchers whose cattle are getting killed just need to stop complaining because it's really not that big of a problem. And what I wondered, both in writing and I wonder now is if it was his pocketbook, if it was his checkbook, if it was his livelihood, I wonder if he would be as cavalier and as blithe about it as he is in his op-ed.
Wow. Yeah, I'm really thankful that you're bringing all of this to light because yeah, this guy needs to be exposed. I mean, it's been a disaster, but he wrote here. This is all from your Substack, but this is a quote from that op-ed from December of last year where he said, "quote Wolves are the least threat to Colorado's livestock industry." Consider two facts. Colorado has been home to 2.6 million cattle and sheep for decades. Exactly 25 head of livestock have been lost to wolves since last winter's reintroduction, mostly in a limited area attracted in part by a carcass pit, and a few ranchers reluctant to employ conflict minimization tools offered by CPW. He says, though any
Yeah.
loss is regrettable, 24 animals out of 2.6 million is hardly a catastrophe. I mean, yikes, folks. It's like it just reminds me of that, like, kind of the Soviet Stalin type of quote, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's only a few people. You got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, it's but like you said, Cory, to those ranchers, that's their livelihood. That's
Right.
an investment. That's their property. That's something that's going to determine if their family stays in the business or not. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. I mean, the concerns of the little cogs in the machine, as Stalin called them. I mean, again, in aggregate, yeah, there are greater sources of mortality for cattle in the state than wolves in aggregate. But when you look at it in the local dimension, like the percentage versus the local dimension, the numbers stick out a lot more. And if you are the guy who just lost all that, the numbers stick out even more to you. And again, these are the people that are supposed to be working with ranchers and hunters and oil and gas in our state to let them have access to state owned resources that are owned by the public, to let them make use of that and then drive revenue back into the state, which helps fund our schools. These are the people that are supposed to be working with them on that. It just blows my mind. And I don't understand why the vote for confirmation was so easy for Prebill in the Senate. The other gentleman I don't know much about, so I won't comment there, but Prebill sailed right through the Colorado Senate, which surprised the hell out of me.
That's interesting, and I have to wonder if they just didn't know. Say the Republicans in the Senate just really aren't aware, because
Yeah.
this is something that most people don't talk about. And I think if we have our mainstream media, they're going to obviously, or even public media, which we've talked about before, are going to present things one way. But then you have people like you, people like Rachel Gable, and others out there, Lindy Browning, trying to get some of the information out there. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not. Just maybe this information's not getting out there. So hopefully, can get more of this out there to people because it is absolutely ridiculous, like you said, to have people in charge of these policies appointed in governmental positions that have this
Right.
strong ideological bent that's totally against something that employs so many people, that feeds so many people, and is part of our Colorado way of life.
Right. Or the media just ignores it entirely. I mean, I outside of Rachel Gable, I don't think I've seen any coverage of this anywhere in any mainstream outlet. Even ones, I mean, like Rachel Gable's work will appear as an op-ed in the Gazettes or Colorado Politics, but I can't recall any major news outlet with a news story about this. Now, can you imagine that if somebody who had been at January 6th, maybe, and who had said complimentary things about January 6th, a la the way Rosmarino says them about that Vail arson, can you imagine that that would not be in every single front range paper if the governor had, if it was a Republican governor who had appointed someone who said stuff like that about, say, like January 6th, or, if it was a Republican who had said something bad about gay people in the past, or, like that would, it just blows my mind it's not in the news.
Yeah, no, well said for sure. 100% Corey. And at least there's a call, there's an opportunity for individuals to have a voice to
Yes.
stand up. And you got to check
Mm-hmm.
out Corey's full letter that he wrote at the Substack about this meeting to the State Land Board about this. But great stuff, really important. Definitely read that. But what can people do, Corey? How can people have a voice? What can they do?
Yeah, if you want, the letter is on my Substack. And please, anybody that's ever listening to this or reading anything, like any of the letters that I write, if stuff of that out of there is useful, please make use of it. I don't, I'm not a huge fan of saying just copy and paste the whole letter because boards know how that works. But if there are parts of it that are useful in your advocacy, please do. I mean, that's why I put the letters up there. So, Dr. Rosmarino is the state land board will be deciding on her being employed, like does she get the job or not, at a June 12th state land board meeting. Okay. um that the agenda for that meeting will go up on Thursday, June 5, and that will be the time at which, if you wanted to attend the meeting, it's a virtual meeting, so not like drive somewhere, but like attend it via Zoom. That's when the agenda goes up, is what I understand. So look for that agenda then, and then there will be information as to how to sign up for that then. But you can right now, today, no matter what day it is, even up till the 11th, I think, you can write comment and send it to them. And I put those links in my Substack or on my Facebook page if you want to find where to send in written comment. And either one helps. Again, things may not always go our way, but I always like to send in comment or go to these meetings because they need to know people are watching and they need to know people are paying attention. And I always figure that no matter what way the decision goes, whether it's the legislature or this or anything else, they will not leave the room that day thinking no one disagreed. They won't leave thinking that everybody believes the same. And that perhaps what happens is that she gets hired, but she's put on notice by the public that they're watching. And so is the governor. And that absolutely atrocious vet board appointee, Kessler, got on that vet board, and she continued to just be a nightmare for public relations. And enough people paid attention. And even though she was on the board, now she resigned, but somebody leaned on her and she left. And you put somebody like Rosmarino, if she makes it onto the board, she's on notice if a bunch of people speak up. And then if a bunch of people pay attention and speak up, maybe she won't be in that job no more.
Exactly, exactly. No, well said. People need to speak out. They need to get involved. And like you said, it's not the only step, but it is a first step, and it's an important
Yep.
step so that these other, people on this board, other people in the media, I mean, that's how you start generating that controversy and how start generating that awareness, really, for like the senators when an appointment comes up, or
Yeah.
a governor or candidates. We got a big election coming up in 2026, and all these things can be campaign issues, but only if people are talking about them, only if people are talking to their neighbors about them, writing
Yep.
op-eds, writing letters to these organizations. But yeah,
Yeah.
getting out there in the public and share this information, share Corey's articles, and share this video out there. But yeah, we got to get the word out, folks.
Mhm.
Please speak up, have a voice, attend that meeting. But let's pay attention, get involved, be a participant in your government, and let's push back because it's not going to happen unless people start stepping up.
Right. And letters to the editor is another perfectly valid way to do this. Write a letter to your editor in the local paper because maybe they're not covering this, but people that would read the opinion section like, wait, what are they doing? If they see a letter to the editor. And there's a couple other things I'd like to mention. The first is that her no, sorry, pre-bill making it past the Senate is yet another reminder that even if you think you are in a safe Republican district, you still need to be paying attention. Like, I don't have to worry about it because I've got a Republican senator and I've got a Republican representative, and I know that they're Republicans and they're going to vote the way that I want them to and the way I like them to. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. No, you do need to worry and you do need to pay attention and you do need to contact them. And then the second thing is that don't feel as though attending one of these meetings virtually means that you have to take a morning off and sit in front of your computer and wait. There are ways to do this from any touch tone phone anywhere. Like I have my little jitterbug cell phone, which is not a smartphone. And there are ways to dial in and participate in these meetings, even with, old school tech like that. You don't necessarily have to waste an entire morning. You can just have your cell phone on the desk next to you. People are talking while you're doing your office work. And then when your turn comes up, you pick up the phone, unmute, and you say it.
Exactly. So many ways to get involved. No excuses for people to at
Yep.
least try, at least do something. But first step, folks, make sure you subscribe to Cory Gaines' Substack at Colorado Accountability Project. Read Complete Colorado every day. You see Cory's name on there, it's going to be a really interesting article. Oftentimes, information you won't find anywhere else, and he's putting in the work and doing the research. So, Cory, really appreciate you. I'm glad you brought this up. This is something, if you hadn't written about it, I don't think I would have been aware of it. So really appreciate all you do. And yeah, keep up the good fight, sir.
Oh, thank you. I was happy to participate in the process of getting the word out because otherwise, yeah, stuff like this needs to be paid attention to. That's for sure.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to link to everything at Free State Colorado, including the information about sending that letter in that you have posted as well. So any other final thoughts here before I let you go?
No, that's about it. Just like I said, I mean, just pay attention and speak up.
100%, folks. Let's if enough of us speak up and we're paying attention, we start speaking up, then we can really accomplish something. So awesome. Well, appreciate you, Cory. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks. Yeah. Have a good afternoon.
All right, take care.